Welcome to the Rock's Back Pages podcast. I'm Barney Hoskins, and I'm on a computer screen with my colleagues Mark Pringle.
Hi, Barney.
And Jasper Morrison Bowie.
Hello, Barney.
And joining us to discuss all that's new in the world's largest archive of music journalism, all the way from Northwest Massachusetts, is the legendary Byron Coley. Welcome, Byron.
Hello, Barney. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Great to have you here. Byron is one of the great writers on what it says like non-mainstream rock, an heir perhaps to the neo-gonzo Noise Boys journalism of R. Meltzer, Nick Tosches, and of course Lester Bangs. His music writing was collected in 2011's C'est la guerre, and his poetry in 2017's Defense Against Squares. And he's collaborated on several projects with Sonic Youth's Thurston Moore. Byron, you had a very peripatetic childhood, which might explain why you moved around a lot in your early writing career. Is it fair to say that you lived in quite a few places as a kid and then moved around quite a lot as a budding rock writer?
I moved around to a certain extent as a kid. You know, I was born in Manhattan, then I lived on Long Island, then I lived in the Poconos, which is in Pennsylvania. And then I spent a good part of my youth in northern New Jersey, about 40 miles outside of Manhattan. But when I started writing, really was seriously more was when I got kicked out of college in 1976. And then after that, I was just sort of traveling around. I didn't really have much of a fixed base until until 80. I lived in people's house. I mean, I was couch surfing and just traveling around. There was a deal that Trailways and Greyhound had done for a very cheap bus ticket that would go cross country, and you could stop as many places as you wanted as long as you kept going in the same direction. But it could go up and down, as long as you were heading east or west overall. So I would just go. I would just stop places, have like a little press pass, make up these fake press passes to like get into places. And so, you would just go to punk clubs and hang out. And then the next day you get up, get back on the bus and keep going. And, so I did that. I did a lot of that. But I was based on the back and forth really in the later part of the 70s, like from 78 on, I sort of went between San Francisco, LA, Boston, and New York, just kind of.
Yes.
Around and around.
Yes, it's good. When I look through the pieces that we have of yours on Rock's Back Pages, it's and try to kind of plot out where you were when. It's quite difficult to do by the publications.
That's true. I was living in Idaho for the Lydia one. Yeah, I was.
Oh, that's so funny because you mentioned. I thought you were just riffing there and just.
Oh no! I had moved to Idaho. I was living in San Francisco, and a guy came to visit me and said, I was living in an SRO, which is a wino hotel, for $65 a month. And he said, you should come to Idaho. I live in Ketchum, and I could get you a job washing dishes and introduce you to Mariel Hemingway. So I was like, well, that's good. So I hitchhiked out there and lived there for about a few months. And
that's so funny because I thought you were just making that up.
No.
Did you actually get introduced to Mariel Hemingway?
I did, though not by this guy. I did by somebody else though. And I ended up spraying a mouthful of like punch in her face, a soft drink in her direction at a youth meeting group in the basement of a church in Ketchum, Idaho.
I still think you're making this up. I'm sorry. Are you sure you weren't hallucinating?
I was not hallucinating it. It was, it was. Well, I worked in one restaurant that I worked in. Mariel and Margot were both in town at the same time. Mariel's sister, Margot.
Yeah.
And so they would come into this breakfast place every day. So I would sort of see them anyway. But Ketchum was a very small town, and off season, everybody was around. But it's a weird scene.
Well, it's great. It's a great yarn. One of the many bold statements you've made about pop music that I really love is that you hated the Beatles as a kid, because every other American, 99 out of 100 American writers we've interviewed on this podcast, it always starts.
It's like 9 out of 10 dentists agree.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a long time to enjoy the Beatles, but that was a very specific thing. It was like I was in fourth grade, I think, when the the Beatles sort of hit the Ed Sullivan Show. And I was really into surf music at that point, the vocal stuff by the Ripcords and Jan and Dean, the Beach Boys, and, Venture type stuff. We would have these like parties, like dance parties during the daytime for like, grade school kids. And you would be one of those old turntables, be a stack of singles on it. And they'd just be playing and playing and playing. And, you get to dance with a girl or stuff like that. But when the Beatles came along, if there was a Beatles single on there, as soon as it hit the thing, all the girls would scream and run to the record player. And I was like, this is appalling behavior. This is terrible. So, and after a while, the Beatles were so ubiquitous, like the radio stations here, like ABC AM out of New York City, started calling itself WA Beatles C. And that went on for years. And, then you'd be riding around in the car and the top 5 records would be Beatles singles. And it was just like, and everybody, so it just drove me crazy. I had the first American Beatles album, which I'd gotten for a Christmas present, but I never bought another one. I didn't buy, I don't care if I bought or was given that one, but I never, ever so there are curious blanks in my knowledge of Beatles stuff because I'd never really heard albums. So people would talk about these things and I'd just sort of nod my head and go, yeah, it sucks.
Not really my speed, that one.
No, I until I was a parent. And then Beatles is really good music for kids. Little kids really like it. So my kids really got into, my daughter especially was a fan of the Beatles. And, and your daughter, you cut her a lot of slack. So I ended up hearing a lot more Beatles later in my life. But
I love that description of an almost Pavlovian reaction to playing a Beatles record. So if you couldn't go to see them and scream, you'd just go and scream at the record.
Yeah, these were like 4th and 5th grade girls, and it was like, and the Monkees hadn't hit yet. They would do the same thing for the Monkees, like 2 years later.
And you were like, why are they getting all the attention and not me now?
It was exactly, it's like, I practiced a couple suave moves. I would like a little action here. In 4th grade, the action is like, maybe we could hold hands or something, or like dance. I don't know. I found it extremely frustrating as a young man, a very young man, but still, you have your urges.
I wanna hold your hand.
Well, it's very refreshing to hear someone say, that they resented the Beatles because it's.
The thing is that people always talk about the Beatles as innovators. And I always thought the Beatles were not innovators so much as popularizers. And that a lot of their form innovations were introduced by other people. And they had great ears and they had great instinct and they were, talented songwriters and all that stuff. But to say that all of the moves that they made were these original moves, to me, was like denying people who had done it earlier and maybe obviously weren't nearly as well known. They had a huge megaphone for getting this stuff along. But I always felt it was a fundamental misunderstanding and a very good basis for arguing with people about it. So
definitely. And we won't do that now. I like it because I'm not a Beatles obsessive either. And I like this, so there's a great interview that Jason Gross did with you in 2010 for Perfect Sound Forever. And I found that really, really absorbing. And you talk about the California sound, and we'll just briefly, because, by the time this episode comes out, it will have been the 30th anniversary of Jerry Garcia's death. I'm just gonna quote. So you talk about how much you loved Quicksilver and Jefferson Airplane, and you also mentioned Moby Grape, as well as the Mothers and the Velvets, and perhaps in a sense the more obvious names. And Jason asks, how about the Dead? Or the Dead too? And you said, off and on. There was some stuff I liked. I really liked Anthem of the Sun. It says Anthem on the Sun. Anthem of the Sun. But by the time the Dead got really popular with Working Man's Dead and American Beauty, I really hated that period. We could have a real argument about that, couldn't we, Mark?
Yes.
But I get it, because if someone said to me, well, which album do you think Byron Coley would like most of the Dead's? It would probably not be Working Man's Dead. It would be more likely to be the earlier stuff, the more psychedelic stuff.
Right. It's true, but the thing is, there's another social element to that, is that I think of it as the Watkins Glen generation. There was this, like, this is when I was in high school. Like, I mean, I was just out of high school when Watkins Glen happened. Everybody I knew went to Watkins Glen.
Right.
Everybody just went because it was close. And that particular, I mean,
did you refuse to go? Did you like? No, I'm not going.
I mean, I went. I went. You know, I mean, it was. You know, it was just the thing. You would just do these things. Yeah, it was. Everybody was doing it. It was like a way to stand around and be constipated on hallucinogens for a couple of days. The lines were so long at the outhouses that actually people I knew thought they had food poisoning, but they really were just constipated. Anyway, but the you know, drugs do funny things to your perception of what's going on in your body. But it wasn't just there, but it was like what had happened is like everybody in high school started wearing like coveralls, you know, these like dressing like a farmer. And, you know, just like, and all they wanted to listen to, you know, I mean, Neil Young would be in there too, sort of like this sort of like the back to the roots kind of stuff.
Yep.
And that just really hit me the wrong way. I mean, just like, give me I mean, like, you know, girls look cute in overalls and everything, but it's like,
do you mean like dungarees? Like dungarees?
Yeah, but like with bib, you know, with like bibs that like with, you know, like straps that go over your shoulders and like a thing in front. It just looks doofus. and you know, but it was ubiquitous. You know, everybody was like, you know, the Dead and the Allmans especially. I mean, the band was popular, but not on the same level. And the thing is that's weird is that a lot of bands started doing that stuff too. Like the local bands, high school age and guys who are a little bit older, you know, playing these, you know, playing bad versions of country songs.
Yes.
Or bad versions of old folk songs, which just wasn't my thing at all. And then a lot of those guys, like in 74, like overnight, switched to becoming glam, you know, after the Dolls. And there was a band in Jersey called Another Pretty Face who were very popular.
Yeah.
And they'd been sort of a bar band. And then they started dressing like the Dolls and like shortened, like took some of the leads out of their stuff. And people loved that stuff. So these guys who were wearing overalls, the next time you'd see them, they'd have like black fingernails, you know, and like, and a dress or like high heels. And it just,
the next morning, it's those dungarees to platform boots in 24 hours.
Well, you know, teenagers are so malleable in that kind of stuff. It's like whatever wind was blowing, it was like, you know, it would fill the sails of many a drifting boat. And
I'm just going to briefly ask Mark about, because I think Mark would probably say he loves Anthem of the Sun, but he also loves American Beauty. Is it fair to say you have a pretty broad appreciation of the Dead?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm a sort of 68 to 73 dead person, you know.
You're a dead person.
Dead person. Well, one can't really be a dead head anymore. And the stuff I really like, Live Dead is the album that I absolutely adore.
Right.
And I've got yards of their live stuff from around that time. I saw them in 72 at the Lyceum in the Strand. And yeah, I did like the songwriting end of it, the stuff. But what I really love is That's It for the Other One, going on for 25 minutes.
The last time that I saw them was in, I think, 73. And it was the one where they did Sea-Stones during the break.
Oh, like God, I don't know. See, I pretty much stopped around then. So, yeah.
And I went because everybody was sort of, you know, it's like one of those things. Everybody was going. So I went and we got in front of the Tapers Circle. It was outside, you know, in this big stadium in Jersey. And I got so tired because my girlfriend was on my shoulders and they just played for so fucking long. and they played, and it was like, some of the stuff was okay, but a lot of it was sort of like, it was the Godchaw era. Yes. And it was like,
Keith and Donna.
It was kind of boogie. It was sort of like everybody's boogieing, and I am not really a guy who likes to boogie.
Don't worry, I don't think anyone's ever going to mistake you for that, Byron.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you mean Boogie Byron Coley?
Well, only my very good friends call me that.
That's so funny.
I mean, whatever. I have an aversion to popular stuff, So as soon as something gets too popular, it's just like I lose interest in it because it doesn't mean it's not good, some of it, but it's like I'm already interested in like what is not popular to me. That's
absolutely
always more interesting.
I remember Tom Waits saying, if everyone was sloping off that way to the Jimi Hendrix concert, I was walking back. I was walking the other way. And you were probably one of those. For all that, though, I still love Jerry Garcia, I must confess. And I was very sad when he died. I saw the Dead a couple of times. Mark saw them many more times than I did. But I think we just love Jerry, really, don't we? Without being... without being kind of obsessive Deadhead.
No, I mean, I remember when he died. So, I mean, I was up in Vermont in the town where they make Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yes.
I was visiting some friends when the news came on the radio. It was like, oh, wow.
Ben and Jerry Garcia's ice cream.
Exactly.
I mean,
there was a Cherry. Sorry, there was a Cherry Garcia. Ice cream. Yeah.
I mean, you're a big Velvet Underground fan. I always love this parallel I'd throw out to people that which two bands were both called the Warlocks when they first started.
I know.
And had a member of the band who was associated with avant-garde composers. It's the Velvet Underground and the Grateful Dead. Phil Lesh was Berio in the West Coast, and John Cale was
Lamont Young and others.
Lamont Young,
yeah, exactly.
I just love this kind of, this freaks people out, the idea that actually there's an odd parallel between the Dead and the Velvets.
I have Tom Constantine's copy of a Berio album with his ownership mark.
That's fantastic.
But how many times did the Dead and the Velvets play together though?
Oh,
not many. None.
Write in with your answers, pop pickers.
Exactly. Yes, and Byron will send you that copy.
I'm not exactly sure, but I know there was a show in Pittsburgh. I think in '69. There was the Velvets, the Grateful Dead, and the Fugs, and it was the last show of the original of that particular lineup of the Fugs before they disbanded, sort of.
This is fantastic.
And so it's like in Pittsburgh.
Well, I know the Fugs were important to you, and you talk in that interview about ESP Disc and the Fugs. I'm going to jump on now to Crawdaddy and Creem, which I think you started reading relatively early on, and you mentioned this student who said to you, this is in the Jason Gross interview, you had a young, I'm not sure what a TA grad student is, but...
That's a teaching assistant.
Teaching assistant, gotcha.
Yeah.
Teaching assistant grad student. And she said to you, you should just write like you talk. And in a sense, that's a little bit like what Meltzer and Bangs and Tosches did. It was very like just throwing it out there, stream of consciousness. And it's certainly one of the reasons, not the only reason, why I've so enjoyed your writing over the years, Byron. But just tell us about that. Was that like an epiphany to you, that idea of like, why don't I do that? I could do that.
Oh, yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I was I'd been kicked out of college, and I was at a continuing ed class. And it was a young student. I was a grad student who was teaching this class. But everybody else in the class was sort of like these older. I was like 20, and they were sort of mostly married women who were going back to get some degree stuff. And so this woman said that you should and so I started writing about getting in fights in bars and stuff like that. And then you would read these papers in class, and I would read these things, and these women would just be like looking at me like, what the fuck is going on? And then I would always get an A though. And so then they would sort of like start to like put cussing in their like stuff and things like that. It was good. But no, it really was a revel. Nobody had told me that. Like, oh, you can write the way that you speak.
Yeah.
So, and then I realized most of the people whose writing that I liked, that's how they did it. that's how they started off. So then I could just throw out a ton of stuff and then work on it later. And it was what sort of kicked the door open to me to be able to actually write for pleasure rather than just writing for school or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was going to read just a little bit from, so we mentioned, did we mention Teenage Jesus and the Jerks earlier? Lydia Lunch?
Not yet.
We
did Idaho, didn't we?
Idaho.
Oh, yeah,
Idaho.
Idaho.
Back
right.
to Idaho. Well, so this ties in very neatly with Idaho. So I just wanted to give listeners a flavor of Coley prose. And this is New York Rocker, May 1980. Way Out West with Eight-Eyed Spy, which was a later band that Lydia formed. So it starts off, if Lydia Lunch's Queen of Siam, and by the way, we love, if Lydia Lunch's Queen of Siam hadn't come out when it did, I'd probably still be freezing my butt off in Ketchum, Idaho, a town of maybe 2,500, nestled firmly in the Sawtooth Mountains. There were at most 2 people there who'd ever listened to Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. And I'm not standing on a very shaky limb if I say I was the only person in the whole goddamn potato state who could even be remotely considered a fan of the same. And then you say, a little later, with movements seemingly dictated by terminal lassitude, Lydia stared down the audience and shouted, sang, spoke the songs with a fury signifying nothing at all. It was the job she was born to do. And as the set progressed, the specific lyrics took a backseat to the total sound. Now, I knew Lydia a little bit. I never saw Teenage Jesus. But tell us how you sort of got from, the earlier music that you had loved to Teenage Jesus and the Jerks and writing for New York Rocker.
Well, the thing is, when punk or whatever came along before punk came along, it was like my best friends and I were always interested in weird music, just whatever was coming along and stuff that you'd buy, weird imports or, so in that sort of weird part of the 70s, like 73 and 74, we were listening to a lot of like Canterbury stuff and, what would be called like RIO things. We didn't really have a name then, or German things, or, a lot of people were reinvestigating American garage stuff, after Nuggets came out and, all this sort of thing. So we were always just like, you'd see a single advertised, the Patti Smith single would get advertised, or Greg Shaw would write about it in his column in Creem. And, 3 or 4 people I knew would all order it and, you'd get it and stuff like that. So we were always just like, whatever was new coming along, you're just interested in it, whatever it kind of was. In terms of Lydia specifically, though, I mean, the name, you saw a flyer for a band called Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. And we were just like, that's the worst name I've ever heard of for a band. We have to go. We have to go. Yeah, we have to go see this. So you'd go, and it would be, you'd go to Max's to see her, and it would be over in like 10 minutes. It was like, and she would just be standing there especially when she still had her bowl haircut, standing there just like doing this guitar. The band was just maniacs. Bradley had his one drum kit, like like a snare. That was it. It was Gordon Stevenson would just, he looked like he was in a haze, just with his bass, like, where am I? What am I doing? And, then everybody sort of be grimacing and, it was like, wow, this is hilarious. It was like really funny. And but people were so bummed out by it. That was especially entertaining. Of course, they didn't have it took a while for them to have a record out. But when their record came out, then you were like, whoa, it's like, there's graspable, evidence that this really is there. She was just such a striking person. And I had met her, a friend of mine, Angela Yeager, who just had a book come out of memoir stuff.
You worked on that, didn't you?
I helped her with it a little bit.
Yes.
But she had roadied for Teenage Jesus. And I met her at university. And one time then when I was back in New York visiting her, maybe in early 78, she was there and we were sitting out at this, there used to be a bar on St. Mark's Place, this German bar that was right next to the punk store, Manic Panic. So we were sitting in front of this German bar. It was me, Angela, her sister Hillary, Annie Anxiety, and somebody else. And Lydia came along. And so she introduced me to Lydia, who was like incredibly mean and knocked a beer on me. And and I was like, wow, that's pretty, she's the real package here.
What is it with women throwing liquid at you? There seems to be a recurring
or you throwing
theme.
liquid at them.
I don't want to read too much into it. I like to think maybe they're just trying to mark their turf. But
honored to be their turf.
But
that's very
But anyway,
good.
so anyway, we became friends, and she was very personable.
As you do with people that throw beer at you.
It's true. I mean, she's my son's godmother.
Oh,
No,
wow.
that's fantastic.
Wow.
Brilliant.
My son is 35. So, but
is she still like a spiritual mentor to your son?
no, but I have good pictures of them playing baseball when he was like a little kid and stuff. They're really good pictures from back in the early 90s. But she was, she's not a doting godmother.
No, as I said, you're a little when she's in London hanging out with the birthday party guys,
right.
I got on really well with her. But doting is not a word I would have used.
No, she's an
amazing woman.
She is a one of a kind individual.
Yeah, she is.
And very funny, very, very funny. Although, man, she can be mean.
Oh yeah, she can be mean. So you talked about like always gravitating towards weird music. I guess, at a certain time, there was nothing weirder, or the king of the weirdos, I guess, was like Captain Beefheart. The music didn't get much more out there than Troutmask Replica and other albums. And you've written a lot about the man born Don Van Vliet, and you interviewed him for New York Rocker in 1978. And I think Andy Schwartz, who we had on the podcast, said, well, you know more about Beefheart than anybody.
Right.
And
right.
You've got like 6 hours to prepare for this interview tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah,
so,
pretty much.
Just tell us what Beefheart meant to you when you first heard him, etc.
Beefheart I first heard on when one of the Zapid Warner Brothers Zapid compilation came out that had a Bizarre Straight on it, and had all the Bizarre Straight artists on it, and I was just like, I was immediately smitten. I don't think I'd ever heard any of it. I don't think I'd ever heard the first couple of records. So I was like 12 or 13 or something like that. Troutmask was an extremely expensive record because like Warner Brothers sometimes a double package have a double album at a single album price. But this was like a full double album price for that record. So I looked at it for many months before I actually bought it. It was
Tried to just absorb it by osmosis without having to pay for it.
Well, I mean, Langdon Winter's piece in, Rolling Stone had been really like revelatory.
Which was 1970, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And, whatever. You just couldn't. It was like you couldn't ignore it. You needed. I mean, it was like I had to hear this record, so I finally bought it, and my reaction was similar to what Matt Groening told me. I did a thing for Spin on the 25th anniversary of Troutmask, and Matt told me he's like, yeah, I got this record. Everybody said I should have it. I'd like it. Oh, you'd like this record. This one's you'd really like this one. So I played it, and it's just like it sounded totally random. The whole thing was random, and then I played it again and I realized there's this one thing where they start repeating. They're doing the same riff again and again. So it's like, it's not random. They're actually playing this way on purpose.
Yes.
So if that's true, I really need to figure this out. And, so I would do that. One of the best places I ever heard Troutmask was I worked for a while as a security guard at a beach, and it would be there at night.
Which beach?
It was a beach in New Jersey at a Lake Kinnelon. And, but it was a pretty big lake, and they had a big PA system there. And so I brought down a turntable.
Can see what's happening here.
Yeah, we ran the turntable into the PA system, and we're playing Troutmask Replica at full blast, on a Sunday night around 11. And it's going all across this lake and like echoing back. It was fantastic. And then the phone calls started coming in. So we had to like, I don't know. We hear something too. We can't figure out what it is.
The aliens are coming.
Make it stop.
I don't know. I'll try to stop it. But it was great.
So funny.
But it was
emerged
fantastic.
from the lake. It's coming.
Yeah, it's a lake creature. But it was just like, I mean, Beefheart was a fascinating guy. If you didn't know him or anything about him, you could make up all this stuff. Just look at those pictures on Trout Mask, and he makes those guys dress like this, and they do it, and like, I never knew a vacuum cleaner could look so good, and stuff like that. I mean, some of it was the way Ed Karief shot, like solarized some of those pictures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what an amazing like portrait for that band. And then when I would talk to like people later, I'd be like during the making of that album, I interviewed everybody to do with that record, like everybody who played on it and all that stuff. And I'd be like, well, so you guys would go out like this, dressed like that and stuff? And they'd go, oh yeah. And I'd go like, well, how about like when you guys got busted famously shoplifting at a supermarket? And Don, I think, was the only one who got caught. And I was like, how could you like go in dressed like that though and try to steal stuff from like a regular supermarket? They go like, we hadn't really thought it through. And I was like, well, how did Don get caught? And everybody said the same thing. Like, oh, Don, he wouldn't run. He because he couldn't look cool and run at the same time. So he would rather get hit by a car than have to run across a street. He would just walk. You couldn't speed the guy up no matter what. And so they just walked up and nabbed him. Everybody else had like run off. But just stuff like that. The fact that Beefheart wouldn't run, it was like, wow, that's like really good. Also,
and you've not run a day since in your life. Yeah?
I have not. I stopped running entirely. I mean, this is in my tribute to
you
Don.
barely walk now, Byron.
It's true. But people also talk about Beefheart's like, having fake heart attacks. Like if Don, things weren't going his way, all these guys describe, Don would like fake having a heart attack. And I don't know, there was an American TV show called Sanford and Son with Red Fox. It was based on Steptoe and Son, the English show.
Yes.
And I don't know if in Steptoe and Son he had fake heart attacks, but in Sanford and Son, Red Fox had these fake heart attacks where he'd grab his chest and throw his hand up in the air. And his dead wife was named Louise, and it'd go, Wheezy, I'm coming. And so finally I asked, I don't know, John French or Zoot or somebody like that, like, well, I mean, what were these like? I mean, was it like Sanford and Son? They go, oh yeah, it was exactly like that. You'd be like, oh, I'm having a heart attack. Oh, it was great. And I was going to start trying to do that, but nobody would really let me get away with it.
Well, listen, we thought this was the perfect episode and you the perfect guest to play some clips from an audio interview from 1972 with Don Van Vliet, which Gary Lucas sent us. And Mark is going to tell us a bit more about this because it is our first audio interview with the genius Captain Beefheart. Mark.
As you said, it's January 72, and he's just taking Spotlight Kid on tour, but promoting Spotlight Kid, his new album. And he talks about being more accessible. I mean, compared to Trout Mask Replica, it really is. So listen, and talks about not being a druggy freak. A lot of people seem to think he's a druggy freak. He's not. Let's listen to what he has to say.
I'm gonna booterize you, baby. I'm gonna booterize you, lady.
Well, what I'm doing is getting more accessible so that I can let people know that I'm not trying to make them take drugs to listen to me. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people have been taking hard drugs, I heard, to get into Trout Mask Replica.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't want that. That's not what I want.
I understand.
I did it sober. I don't use drugs.
Yes, I believe that.
And, Zappa and a few other people tried to make it look like I was a bizarre freak.
Yeah, they put you on with the GTOs. And
that's ridiculous, man. I'm an artist.
That's great, isn't it? I mean, he's marvelous throughout this interview.
It's a great interview.
He's really good.
Super.
He talks about his current band, which I personally think are probably the best magic band: Zoothorn Rollo, Ed Marimba, Wingdeel Fingerling, Rocket Morton. He talks about himself as a musician, playing saxophone and harmonica. He talks about writing his first album, Safe as Milk, with a guy called Herb Berman, who is co-credited on every track. Talks about a TV commercial for Lick My Decals Off, which is regarded as obscene. I have no memory of that whatsoever.
It's good.
And he talks about his first magic band with Ry Cooder, who left as fast as he could, and his first singles for M. And listen to the next clip about not being a Dada rock artist.
Rather than I wanna hold your hand, I wanna swallow you whole, and I wanna lick you everywhere it's been.
Do you feel at all uncomfortable being saddled with the term Dada Rock? I think Time Magazine or something
really
like that.
Corny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so far back.
Right.
You know, they're always willing to put a label. That's why I did Lick My Decals Off, Baby. Because I knew the younger people now, and even some of the people that chronologically they call older, would get what I meant about that.
Yeah.
I didn't want a cocoon. I'm not a mummy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I know.
I mean, I'm out. There's not a beautiful... The butterfly that's out is as beautiful as it's going to get unless they dig it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a mummy.
It's fantastic. He goes further into his opposition to drugs. He's really, really not keen on drugs at all. And he talks about how he didn't never liked people using drugs in his band and so on and so forth. Talks about writing fiction, poetry, and painting, which, of course, in the end, the last layers of his life, his painting became central to what he did. And I will say this here and now, that of all the, inverted commas, musicians who have chosen to paint, he's the only one I take seriously as a painter. I mean, a genuinely good painter. He talks about his love of Ornette Coleman at some length, which I really like, and I can really understand that. And it seems like there was some friendship there as well. Talks about being prolific, how he just churns stuff out. Talks about the material he's going to play on the tour, his hatred of LA's smog, and living by the sea in Eureka, California. It's fabulous. I mean, I've got a sort of personal... I saw... He talks about coming to Europe. I saw him at the Albert Hall in 1972 on that tour. Remains one of the great shows I've ever seen in my life. It was absolutely astonishingly good. But what I really loved is that Wingdeel Fingerling barely played a note until it came to what's the... Barney, you remember the name of the solo of the track?
That long lunar note. Yeah.
No, Alison Blunderland.
Alison Blunderland, sorry. Yeah, of course.
At which point he goes up to his two Fender amps and just turns them up to 11, plays his solo, and then turns them right back down again. It was fantastic. And it had like a ballet dancer coming on stage, a bass and drum solo to open the show. It was crazy stuff. It's brilliant.
Yeah. No, Ingber was great. He was a really amazing guitar player.
Byron, hearing Don speaking in those clips, does it take you back to your 1978 encounter with him?
I met him other times too, but he was like, I mean, the thing is, in interviews, what he really wanted to do was share cigarettes. He had a tin, like a big tin of Balkan Sobranis, and he had all these weird cigarettes. And at that time, I smoked Chesterfield straights, like king size Chesterfield straights, and he was like, "Oh man, you got to get me one of those." So we'd swap some like stuff, and he'd go, "Oh, Jan, this is fantastic," and whatever. And so, and he had this sort of like, you know how like salespeople, they grab onto something about you, so they next time they see you, they can go, "Hey, headphones," or whatever. When I'd see him anytime after that, he'd call me Chesterfield. Like I'd be backstage, "Hey, Chesterfield."
I have to say, this is something that you and I have in common. The very first time I went to America, which is to make a record no one bought in Muscle Shoals, and I started smoking the unfiltered king-size Chesterfield in the red packet.
Yeah.
And I just thought they were fabulous.
Oh, I thought they were great, and they had a little gift coupon. And when I was interviewing, I was like, yeah, you can get those little coupons so you can get gifts. He's going, "Yeah, man, you get yourself an iron lung."
Wow.
But he was a very, I mean, I would see him then, I'd go backstage, would talk, he's a very jocular guy in that sort of situation. And man, when we did the interview, it was like, it was at the end of a long day of doing interviews up in the Black Rock building in New York. And he was still, he was happy to do, he was really happy to do it, and sign posters and all that kind of stuff, make fun of Devo. Oh, crybaby mama heartbeat music.
He could have been a great rock critic, couldn't he? Really, if he just wrote like he thought and conceptualized.
He was just such a genuinely weird guy. He was like, he was telling me about these shoes. He's going, man, you should really get a pair of these shoes. And I'm like, what are they? And he goes, they're moon shoes, man. They're like, there's this guy here in New York who makes these things. He hand makes them, man. And they're expensive, but you wear them and you don't feel like you have any feet.
More than a rock journalist, I want to hear him as like radio DJ.
Yeah. And I was like, he was, he has the best quotes, that promo album, that Warner's one, has one of my favorite quotes ever. I use it all the time. Like, talks about what you have to do is breathe with all your holes open. And, there's something about that concept that I've always felt like people would be better off if they all breathed with all their holes open.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's a problematic character in many ways. His personal, had a lot of personality things that came out later, the way he treated his band and the way he treated women and stuff like that. But, there's certainly no denying the quality of the music that he did over the years. But it's funny, his ability to like switch on a dime to some of those 70s bands, like the two Virgin albums that came out in the UK, that came out on Mercury in the States, the touring bands with those records were not very interesting, but he still did. I mean, he still sounded pretty good, but in some of the formats of that stuff, it was like not very cool.
They were the two worst records he made, really. They were
hard to listen to. But then the fact that he got those bands of like guys who had studied his stuff and been into it, really True. It was shocking how good some of those later shows were.
So the record that he's talking about in this interview is Clear Spot, right? Where he's
Spotlight Kid.
Spotlight Kid. Yeah. Spotlight Kid. But it's right on the heels of really his toughest album, which is Lick My Decals Off. To really is even more hard-edged, I think, throughout. It doesn't let up in the way, Trout Mask Replica has breathing room in it.
Yeah.
Like, Lick My Decals Off is dense. And it's like, there are, maybe in like Beller and Plain and some stuff like that, there are some things, but it's like, it's a really, really like hard record.
It's just interesting to hear him talk about like consciously wanting to go commercial in quotation marks, be on AM radio. He talks about like how he thinks Ornette's going to be on AM and he himself is definitely going to be on AM radio. And it's just like, what is it's
people have this dream. Jack Holtzman, right? When he went to the Fillmore and saw Cecil Taylor open for the Yardbirds, the Cecil Taylor unit open for the Yardbirds. And he was like, let's sign them. He said, I want to sign these guys. We'll do a split single with them on one side and the Doors on the other side.
That'd be
great idea.
But Cecil wouldn't sign.
Oh.
Right.
So, but I think they're, in that era, there were a lot of people who were thinking of sort of interesting possibilities, but the finances of it for the record companies were so different then, In the United States, anyway, the record companies owned all their own distribution. They had their own plants. They had their own studios. Everybody's on staff. So you can record an album pretty cheaply. You can press it up almost nothing. So it's like, we own all this stuff anyway. Why not do it? And then if we doesn't sell, we take it as a tax write-off. Mm-hmm. So you see all these Elektra albums, they only pressed 15,000 copies of, whether it's, the Holy Modal Rounders or Pat Kilroy or, whatever, all these sort of interesting records that you're thinking like, why did they do that? Or if you look at Capitol Records, who had the Beach Boys and the Beatles as just, pumping the stuff out. They had, at that point, they probably had Sinatra too. And they just like, these cash cows. There's all these Capitol records. I still find Capitol records from the 60s that I've never seen before. And it's like, what, what, like, how could that be? And it's like, they just came out. If they didn't hit in a week, they just would they'd be cutouts, a new band. And then they'd only be out, a couple $1,000. So,
Byron, in the interest of time, we're going to have to leapfrog, nothing to do with you, but we're just going to have to leapfrog your Californian years, which is a shame because, well, I will mention the column you had in the LA Weekly, just because it was called Tongue Wrestling in a White Hot Void. I had to get that in. And I was in LA between 82 and 83, so I remember your byline, obviously. And also you mentioned Richard Gere and Matt Groening in that interview, and I did a few pieces for the LA Reader and met Matt Groening before The Simpsons and talked about Beefheart with him.
Oh yeah,
and he was obsessed then, as you alluded to earlier.
Oh, I know, yeah.
But you did a lot out there, but we're going to move forward when you move back to the East Coast, and I'm really interested in this. In a sense, this sort of juxtaposition between, on the one hand, the Forced Exposure magazine that you were such an important part of and put Sonic Youth on the cover in 85, but you also were writing for Spin. And I'm just interested in that. Obviously, Spin was kind of paid decently, right?
Yeah.
Was it, how did you manage that juxtaposition between those two very different worlds?
In a way, I really didn't, because what had happened was when Spin, I was doing Forced Exposure because my wife and I moved back to the East Coast. We bought a computer, and we spent like $6,000 getting a dual floppy computer and 2 printers, and so we would be able to now do. Jimmy had stopped doing Forced Exposure. Jimmy Johnson, who did Forced Exposure, had stopped for about a year and a half. And a lot of it was because the person had done it with had left, but he couldn't do. We could now do, instead of just having to type everything up, we could do it on computer, even though there were no WYSIWYG word processing programs then. But we could do that stuff. So we started doing that. We had similar interests, and at the same time, not too long after, what happened was Spin started, and that was really LA guys who had started that. Although it was, Bob Guccione, but it was some bartender who was the actual editor. Ed Raisin was a bartender from LA, and he had hired all West Coast people. And Andrea Enthal got hired, who was a DJ on KPF, the Pacifica station in LA, who I would fill in on her show. She did a show called Studio Z. When she was out of town, I would handle the show for her.
Okay.
Which had taken over from Meltzer's Hepcats from Hell. It was his time slot.
Hepcats from Hell. I love it.
Yeah. And so she was going to be the underground columnist for Spin, and she called me up right away and said, they're paying real money at this thing. I'll give you the guy's name. And so I called them up, and they were like, okay, yeah, how about if you do a thing on Sonic Youth? So I did a thing, and it was supposed to be in the first issue. That it ended up getting held for a little bit. And then Andrea left the underground column. So I got to take the underground column, and then Richard Gere left the LA Reader and was the editor of Spin then after a while too. So it was like, I didn't really have to do much of anything. They would let me do kind of what I wanted, because I never really would write about stuff I didn't want to write about, except when I was writing a lot for Star Hits. And they'd go oh, you've got to cover this Billy Ocean show. And how do you like to see Jefferson Starship? So, that was a different thing, but I wouldn't go to those shows really, but I would write about them. And, but for me, it wasn't much of a transition, because I really wouldn't if they said I had other outlets for writing. If somebody wanted some real crap, I'd write for, after I did some couple books, I had an agent sort of an editor I'd work with who'd been Lester's editor, Karen Moline, and she'd get me, and Madeline Morell, they would get me gigs, write for Business Week Careers, or just so I could write that kind of shit. You just pour out crap, content for, a buck and a half a word. But Spin sort of gave me a lot of leeway, and they paid really, they paid me $1.50 a word. and plus expenses. And so I could make actual money because forced exposure was like a full-time job. I tried to do 10 reviews every day and like all the other shit we had to do. There were really just two of us. And so that was a lot of work. And we didn't pay ourselves anything up till a certain point. And then we put ourselves on $150 a week salary, which is how it went through the whole rest of the thing.
Right.
So you needed something else to like do. So I'd write a quickie paperback or Spin paid well. So. But places that would write me, like music magazines that would write me and ask me to do something I didn't want to do, I just wouldn't do.
Well, you've stayed pretty true to those principles. There's a great bit in that interview where you and we'll come on to Christgau in a minute. You're sort of talking about his consumer guide, and you said, "But I always thought, who cares about this mainstream shit? I don't give a fuck about most of this stuff." And you never hoard yourself out for Jefferson Starship or anyone else. And I have huge admiration for that. I think we've got a review of a Madonna album by you, maybe for Spin, but it's just like... It's the most irreverent thing probably ever written about Madonna. It's just hysterical.
I reviewed an Aha record also, although I did it as a double review with Poison Idea album, which was just like...
we have to talk about Christgau for a second because your friendship and association with Sonic Youth, and you're still, closely sort of associated with Thurston, who obviously lives here now.
Right.
If you walk through Dalston Junction, you may bump into him at any moment.
You can't miss him because he's still about 6'6", isn't he?
I know. He should take a few inches off, blend in.
I think it would amuse listeners to just hear about this kind of fantastic war with Robert Christgau, the Dean of American Rock Critics. And you say, Dean of American Rock Critics? That's what like being the Dean of Shitsville.
It is! I mean,
but tell us the story, Byron. Tell us the story about Kill Your Idols.
Well, it was one of those things. Christgau had been writing bad reviews in the Voice. To be giving negative reviews to Sonic Youth, who at that point I thought were, if not the best band in New York, certainly among them. And you couldn't. I didn't see how you could go to a Sonic Youth show in '85 or '86 and not really kind of be blown away. And he would hem and haw. So we were going to do this single with this Sonic Youth issue. We wanted to do a single, so they did a version of Kill Your Idols. And they gave us this Raymond Pettibone drawing that Kim had with a swastika and stuff like that. And I was just joking around. We were like, Kill Your Idols, Kill Your Idols. I was like, how about if we just title the song, I Killed Christgau with My Big Fucking Dick? And so we sort of we were just laughing about it. And then we were like, well, we could try it. I mean, Kim would be really pissed off, but maybe we can get it past her. And so we did it, and we sent the stuff, because in those days you'd send stuff by fax, to see. So we made sure it was kind of and they were really kind of crappy, a lot of, especially Thurston's fax machine was all gray. So I don't think they could quite see what the title change was. And so they approved it without, and so then it came out, and it was everybody sort of hit, Christgau kind of hit the roof, and we had to explain that it was not, it wasn't their doing. Of course, after that, then he started giving us some good reviews, so maybe it worked. I don't really know.
I don't know why you wanna press Christgau. I let that shit die and find out the new dawn.
I mean, you're not the first of our writers to have gone to war with Christgau. Mike Jahn, way back in the end of the 60s,
right,
writing for the New York Times, Christgau hated him. There's a mutual dislike.
Right.
It's splendid.
Christgau's he's a weird guy. Obviously, he's, smart and knows a lot of stuff. And we had overlaps. He really liked the Holy Modal Rounders and Michael Hurley stuff, which was a key. And so I would see him at these shows. And he was the only guy who recognized at a Holy Modal Rounders show that they were doing an auto salvage cover when they used to do Para Highway live sometimes. And he was like, what is this song? All right, we were like, oh, it's a auto salvage song. He's like, oh yeah, thanks, man. He's like, I knew it wasn't theirs. But he was such a dick. I mean, he was like he was like one of those guys, like, could you call me Professor Criscal? I mean, or just like, I don't know. He just stuck in my, the voice was always, like a tough thing, but it read really well generally, but their music column was like, the only guy who's a music editor they ever got along with was Doug Simmons. He gave me a lot of work. But then when Chuck Eddy came in, he was like,
well, because he was a Chris Gow disciple, wasn't he? So he probably
was kind of, yeah. I mean, he and I really never saw eye to eye. He would call me up and go like, why would Forced Exposure write about the Misfits, but they won't write about Metallica? And I was like, because Metallica's on a major label and everybody knows about them.
Right.
And it's like, it's not whether they're any good or not good. It doesn't really matter. It's like, why would you want to write about something that everybody fucking knows about?
Yeah.
Who cares what you think?
Apparently the thing to avoid is his autobiography. I've heard pretty terrible things about it. Slightly too many descriptions of his sex life.
Yeah, well, he and Georgia were swingers. So.
I think this episode may have scuppered for good any chance of getting Chris Gow on the podcast. If you're listening, Robert, we really love you and respect you despite everything.
I mean, Chris Gow he's definitely an interesting character, and he's a very good writer.
Sure, he's written some amazing things. Yeah,
his idea. I mean, I never understood why anybody would want to write about popular records that people know about. It's like people have already formed their opinions on them, and they like them or they don't like them. I mean, there's not much more. They hear it on the radio, they like it or they don't like it, and then it goes on from there. What I always felt like it was more interesting as a writer was to try to get people to at least know that there was other stuff out there that they wouldn't run into in a regular type format. And, some people say, oh, you shouldn't use comparisons and similes like, this is like that or anything like that. But if you give people a little bit of a step ladder to get into it also, I think it's helpful to give them an idea of what kind of thing they're getting into, especially when there's so much stuff. I mean, admittedly now people can go and they can go to YouTube or band, like all these places where you can hear some of the stuff. But that wasn't always the case. And now it's just overwhelming, the amount of stuff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, to me, it's like being a music writer, I mean, beyond just the sheer glory of doing it, and the accolades and the money that flow from the clouds, like so much melted butter. It's, if you can't write about stuff that you want to write about and stuff that is not in the mainstream, where it's like you could potentially introduce people to stuff. To me, it's the greatest thing is like writing something and then somebody goes, oh, I didn't, you mentioned that Terry Reid thing. I mean, I did that Terry Reid thing and, whenever it was in Mojo. Mojo was doing that little series of like lost records things. And, people would be like, oh, I never heard that record. It's a great record. Terry Reid got in touch with me about it. It was like, oh, thanks. It's, and it's like, it's sort of like, oh, it's nice that somebody would go out then and want to buy that record. Not that it's going to put any money in Terry's pocket or anything like that, because it wasn't in print, but whatever. There's so many unknown records, even mainstream kind of records like that. Terry Reid's a mainstream sort of a record in a certain way. I mean, it was on a major label by a known artist and stuff like that. There's so many of those that fall into through the cracks.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's a good way to kind of finish up this episode, because as I'm sure Byron, Terry died just a couple of days ago. And I checked immediately to see whether we had anything by you on Terry. And of course we have that piece from Mojo, March 2003. And I'm just going to read a couple of short paras from it because it is a beautiful piece. I think it's a beautiful record. Mark and I were listening to it again yesterday. So you start off, it's typical Coley, really. By almost any measure, 1973 was a craven, rotten fuck of a year. Which I love. Although many pick 1968 as the nadir of 20th century underground culture, the scene, at least in the US, hit so many bottoms in 73. It's a wonder we didn't all just keel over and croak. And then you list Wake of the Flood, which does have Unbroken Chain on it, I think. Long John Silver, Dylan, just the album called Dylan, which is a piece of shit. You're absolutely correct. Sophronia, Shoot Out of the Fantasy Factory. These were the best shots that our cultural avatars could offer. All seemed lost. And then you say, into the midst of this savagely depressing wasteland, Terry Reid introduced River, one of the most lazily magnificent records of that or any other year. And you write beautifully about it, and you talk about, Mark was talking about this yesterday, the Glastonbury Fair, 1971,
right.
where Terry plays in this video of that. And you say the group's music rocks in a real horizontal and funky way, long on vibes and atmosphere, broadcasting great, blissed out if secular ripples of soul and sound. That's exactly how River sounds to me.
Right.
So thank you for writing that piece. And I did feel really sad that Terry's gone. I think he's one of the great British singers of kind of American music in a way.
Yeah.
I spoke to him on the phone once about nearly becoming Robert Plant, right? You know,
right.
He was the singer that Jimmy Page wanted for Zeppelin. And I saw him performing. I don't know if you ever saw one of these shows. He had a Monday night gig.
Yeah, right.
In like on Pico Boulevard.
Right.
And it would always be whoever was in town. If Robert Plant was in town.
Yeah, just pick up.
He'd jump up on stage. And it was, and Waddy Wachtel was playing. It was fabulous stuff.
Yeah.
And he was singing O.V. Wright songs. And it was just like, I love this guy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just Terry Reid. I mean, what do we think about Mark? I mean, just your tuppence on Terry.
Well, I mean, the curiosity is that in a sense he passed me by at the time.
Right.
He was kind of second division's a terrible term, but he was a guy always on the periphery of big stuff. And so, I mean, just didn't register. And weirdly, it was watching that really terrible Nick Rogue directed Glastonbury Fair movie, which is just dreadful in every respect. Far too much nakedness and so on and so forth.
A man who's tired of nakedness, and tired of life.
and
what a jade.
and Terry Reid is by far the best thing of the entire movie. I mean, he's got a fabulous band. David Lindley on lap steel.
The great David Lindley.
Alan White's brilliant drummer.
Great drummer.
Yes. You know, bass player whose name I completely forget, but who's like an R&B bass player. And
Linda Lewis.
Linda Lewis comes and sort of sings really well with him. And I'm listening to thinking, this is Robert Palmer before Robert Palmer. Well, as it isn't before Robert Palmer. They're absolute direct contemporaries, but very similar sort of white soul voices. And I just loved it.
Plus, there's that hat.
Yes, there's that hat.
Yeah.
He looks so stoned in that hat. And that was a look that was later picked up on by Royal Trucks.
Oh.
Yes. Very Royal Trucks.
Yeah.
But he was also a really sweet guy. I mean, you know, the couple of times that I talked to him, there was no hint of bitterness that he hadn't been in Led Zeppelin or anything else. And no real bitterness towards Mickey Most or anything. He just was doing his thing, living out in the desert. And he was a cool guy.
Maybe he's a happy man. I mean, it's allowed.
He was a reasonably happy guy. I don't know.
No happiness permitted.
Well, the thing is, I mean, obviously, Wexler, whoever it was, you know, Atlantic really believed in him because they put a lot of money into River. I mean, they recorded the whole thing twice, in different places. So, I mean, you know, I think that he legitimately got his shot. And just for whatever reason, I know, who knows why, it never happened. So, you know, I don't think he could, you know, people can be bitter, but I think they tend to morally be bitter if they never get their shot.
Yeah.
If they get a shot and it's just like, don't connect, but they're happy with the project and they think it went well, it's like, you know, bad timing, you know?
It is a weird thing with you. I have this memory of when I first started buying secondhand records in Soho in London when I was a schoolboy. I go to Cheapo Records. And that River album, there were more copies of that people had just brought in because they didn't want it anymore than anything else. And so I assumed it was shit. You know, and I didn't buy one of those many secondhand copies years later, but I thought, well, this is just like that opening track, Dean. It's just like one of the like funkiest sort of white soul things ever recorded. It's unbelievable.
I don't think I'd ever heard it until we listened to it in the office on Tuesday, and it's pretty great.
It was. I mean, the thing is, at the time, it was one of 3 records that my girlfriend and I could agree on listening to when it came out.
What were the other 2?
Fleetwood Mac's Bare Trees and Lou Reed's Berlin.
Okay. Oh, that's a really lovely romantic record to listen to together.
Yeah, you know, I mean, this was a doomed relationship. Clearly,
about to say, how long did that relationship last?
It lasted, 6 months or something like that. But it was on the skids from the start. But you know, but those are the 3 that we could agree on, and it was like
she agreed on River. You swam in that river together.
Yeah.
That's good. We'll always have River.
We'll always have River.
Beautiful.
And it's a record that, like, generally when I've played it for people who didn't hear it, seem to like it. It's just like, like as you said, it was around, and then it was cut out here, you know, massively, and people just never
didn't get it.
Yeah.
Girl with a heart that keeps on changing. Girl with a mind that's moving on.
I wanted to say, going back to what you were talking about earlier about wanting to shine a light on stuff that's not being listened to. I'm the sort of self-appointed custodian of The Wire in the Rockstack Pages office. And I love The Wire, and I love coming upon your byline in The Wire. Mm. And I have to say, you do a fantastic job of your own stated mission, because I've never heard of a single thing that is in either any of your reviews or in your column. I also adore the fact that your column, Size Matters, is the only one that has a sort of call at the end to send cassettes 7 inches, 10 inches for possible inclusion in Size Matters to Byron Coley, P.O. Box 627 Northampton. You know, I think that's a lovely detail. And of course, it's because that column is all about, you know, the media itself as much as it is about the music that's on it. So, but I think it's great what you do for The Wire.
Well, thanks. Yeah. It's you know, they give me pretty good, you know, freedom to do what I want. I mean, they do ask me to do stuff I don't want to do, but you know. But I mean, the fact that, like, they would let me review, like, you know, when that collected Royals World Countdown came out, I was so excited, but I couldn't find anybody else who was, like, excited at all.
Yeah, it could be a lonely plow to furrow to plow.
I'd be like, oh man, but it has an actual, like, promo picture of Blue Cheer with Veil in it, like the 6-man Blue Cheer, and, you know, it's got all this great, you know, California stuff. But The Wire let me review it, so I was like, oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah. We had Chris Bond, Bieber Cop on the podcast about 2.5 months ago or so. And that was a joy. We're running out of time. And I just think we do have to mention, the great Eddie Palmieri, news of whose passing reached us this morning. And we were listening to a bit of his stuff in the office. And it sounded so great. I mean, I'm no expert on salsa, but I always just immediately love it when someone puts it on.
What's marvelous about his stuff is it's tough in a way that some salsa can be a little bit too sweet, a little bit too uptown, and his stuff is absolute street salsa. You know, that the octave piano playing, which is him. You know, and it's dynamite. It's really fantastic.
It's just such a superb pianist. I mean, really, like the technique and everything, the muscularity. I think of what you're just saying, Mark. It's just
I first really listened to salsa when our friend Richard Williams, whose name you will know, Byron, he was the editor of Melody Maker and a great music writer, still is a great music writer, and he put together a compilation for Island Records in about 75, just called Salsa with an exclamation, and it had Eddie on it, had Joe Bataan on it. It was just a fantastic selection. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better introduction to the sound of sort of, you know, Spanish Harlem, really.
Yeah. I mean, Will Hermes' book, Love Comes to Buildings on Fire, which I think is one of the best books I've read about New York music, is the first one I've read, which actually treats salsa as important as everything else that was happening at the time. You know, it's like 1/4 of the great cultural exchange that New York City musically.
And I think it was his band that really started to popularize the trombone, which is one of the. I mean, because I love Willie Colon is like one of my favorites band leaders, and the trombone sound there is I think that came from Palmieri's.
Right.
Palmieri's.
El ritmo que traigo es azúcar, azúcar pa' mí. El ritmo que traigo es azúcar, azúcar pa' ti. El ritmo que traigo es azúcar, azúcar pa' mí. El ritmo que traigo es azúcar, azúcar pa' ti.
Wonderful. Have you got any pieces you want to just quote from? And Byron, if these prompt you to comment, just jump in. But these are just a couple of 2, 3, 4 pieces that have entered the Rock Spot Pages library in the last week or so.
Yeah, Michael Oberman, writing for the Washington, D.C. Evening Star in 1968, interviewing the legendary Stardust Cowboy. And and the legendary Stardust Cowboy says, well, I picked the word Stardust because it has to do with space, and I'm very interested in that subject. I took Cowboy because I like country and Western music, and legendary because I'm a legend in my own time. Which he wasn't.
Well, he was. He was because he was famous in the States for being on the show Laugh-In.
Yes, right. Roaring and Must Laugh-In.
And when he came on Laugh-In, I mean, to do Paralyzed, it was kind of a crazy scene. Everybody was like marching around behind him and doing all this stuff. But he was he was such a crazy guy. I mean, I saw him play some amazing shows. He did one show. He did a private show at the Rounder Records warehouse in the early 80s because he couldn't get a gig in Boston. And so these people set up this thing in the back room of the Rounders Record warehouse. And he was just fantastic. He would do a striptease, he'd be pulling off his chaps.
It doesn't. I'm not surprised at all. That you're a devotee, Byron. That does not surprise me.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad I brought something of interest.
No, it was good, and because the backing band, there was 2 people from Christmas, and then the drummer from the Cheater Slicks. Although the Cheater Slicks didn't exist yet. They didn't exist yet.
The second piece is Nick Kent. It's a report on Ron Wood rehearsing for his first tour, backing on the back of his first solo album. I've got my own album to do. Is it called something like that?
It's called exactly that.
Yeah. Right. And basically it's Ian McLagan, Keith Richards, Mick turns up occasionally. But it is this Woody, Richards and McLagan are making a hasty exit to the toilets and returns 5 minutes later in an even more agitated frame of activity. Quoting Ron Wood, "Hey, did you see the Stones on TV the other night? Yeah, the sailor suits, great. And Charlie and all that foam. That song, it's only rock and roll, but I like it. Mick recorded that with David Bowie and me down at my studios. Mick and I played the guitars, then the 3 of us did the vocals. Then Mick took the track and the Stones reconstructed it." He grins almost with pride for a second, even though his face is flushed and agitated. You turn around for another cigarette, and when you look back, Keith, Mac and Woody are straggling off to the toilets again.
Yeah, it's only rock and roll, and it was already shit.
Oh, yeah. What a wonderful era of music.
This is 1 year after your worst year. This is 74, so
that was a really rough period to get.
Yeah.
If you liked weird music, I mean, the thing is, the States literally had almost nothing going on of interest at all.
Apart from the New York Dolls, maybe, and a couple of things like that. You may not have liked them. I mean, Todd Rundgren was doing records. I mean, there were some things I liked.
There were.
Byron is wincing, I think.
No, I mean, the thing is, the Dolls, I liked their records, but the whole Nancy Boy thing was it was such a bad influence because all the other bands in New York, these bad-looking Italian bands from Queens, Brat, Teenage Lust, I mean, these ugly guys thought if they put on some makeup, everything would go really well for them. And it really was horrible. It was just so horrible to look at.
Yeah, but but of course the Ramones came out of that, didn't they? Because they were like a glam band.
They did.
Jerry Ramone, who was already like 6'7", would wear 6-inch platform boots.
That's it. He's like Joey Starr or something like that. Yeah, that was the
totter around
scene.
Queens.
Yeah, Queens at the Coventry. But I mean, the Ramones were like an art project. I remember the first time we saw them, we thought it was like Arturo Vega's like dummies, just like doing a weird minimalist thing. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
But it was a bit like that, wasn't it?
Mark, it definitely was.
Now, that's my lot.
That's your lot?
Jasper, you got anything?
I have just one thing, and it may be too popular, I'm afraid, for you, Byron, because it's about Lana Del Rey, who's surely sold vastly too many records to be worth listening to for you. But it's a fabulous piece of writing. It's Ann Powers in NPR on the 4th of September 2019. Lana Del Rey lives in America's messy subconscious. It's a long piece. It's over 3,500 words. And there's I mean, I wasn't really sure what to quote because there are so many great passages, but she writes, Lana Del Rey is all about wrong combinations, sunset dreams and dirty water, Mexican-American braids and a wetsuit, hip-hop flow and torch song feeling, conventional feminine submissiveness and post-feminist self-possession. Cognitive dissonance is the essence of her art, the way she builds her dream logic. Satin slips, Freudian slips. Throughout her tenure as a pop star, Lana has pursued revelations about how desire disassembles and recombines elements of a woman's personality. I mean, it's really high level.
And Powers is a really good writer.
Yeah, she's great.
And it's fascinating to read because, I mean, Lana Del Rey is. I know, Barney, you love Lana Del Rey and Norman like fucking her. Rockwell and so on. And she's someone whose music I've perhaps just not listened to enough of to really have a sort of strong sense of. I mean, she was like Video Games was like the biggest record when I was however old I was when that came out. So it was always on. But then beyond that, I've not really explored it. But this piece makes me want to explore it more. So contra your earlier assertion that there's no point writing about popular music, maybe there's one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. There are, I mean, I take your point, and there are always inside of popular artists, there's, there are always things to be found. I just, you got to shine the light. You could pick a couple of places a couple caverns to explore, and that's one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for a while I would sell records at the Pitchfork Music Festival in Chicago every summer. Set up a table, sell rare records. And because I would get 3 tickets, I would bring my kids, like my daughter and Kim and Thurston's daughter, stuff like that. And they'd come and they'd be really into all this like music that was playing. And I'd just be like, oh God, there's like, I just see something on the third stage, but it's like, there's an audience for every kind of music. I mean, it's clearly there is. And music provides something for almost everybody. So when I talk about not liking music, it's just like there's stuff that's just not for me, and I don't feel compelled to. But man, for other people, it's like Lana Del Rey is like completely different than what like the Spice Girls or something like like whatever. I mean, it's like I don't know. Stuff can be popular. Just because it's popular doesn't mean can't be subversive or can't be really interesting or like beautifully made and all this stuff and great to listen to. It's just, for me, it doesn't need the same.
It's not your beat.
Illumination. Yeah, it's not my beat. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of a really interesting episode. And it just reinforces my admiration for the fact that you do stay true to your kind of core mission, I think. And you have championed a lot of music that might not have got any attention otherwise, and I think that's a pretty noble endeavor. What do you do most of the time now? You're working on a book. I know you deal in rare records and things like that. What's your main kind of occupation?
Right now, I mean, I've got a new book coming out.
Oh, great! When is that?
Sometime this fall,
okay.
I think. It's like Thurston Moore, Matt Gustafson, and I worked on have a book about free jazz.
Ooh, wow!
So
look forward to that.
That's coming out sometime soon. But the main thing that I'm doing now is I'm running this thing called Steve Albini's Closet.
Yes,
Steve's. I had made a deal with Steve about 5 years ago to help him sell off his records and stuff like that to do what he wanted to do, something else, and then he died.
Yeah.
And So his widow approached me to see if I would still do it. So I said, I'll take a year and do that. So I'm doing that. I've got and that's kind of a full-time job. So I've got that. I'm still doing writing. I mean, I've got a record store, and I'm still writing stuff.
And that's in Northampton, the record
store. It is,
store.
Yeah.
Northampton, Massachusetts. So anyone listening who's in the area, pop in. How often are you in the store?
Oh, it's as little as possible. I mean, I am not.
Good call.
My problem is that I was brought up in a time where civility was still counted as a positive thing.
Yeah.
And so,
what is that? What is civility in America today? It's not a lot of it around, is there?
No, it's kind of a forgotten art. But it's so ingrained in me that I still have to be nice to customers when they come in, and it's incredibly wearing on my on my self-esteem and my mental capacity and my overall well-being. And I think it diminishes.
You don't have to be nice to them anymore. It's fine now. You can
I mean, the thing is, now everybody's so crude. Like when I worked at Rhino Records in the 80s, we had our motto there was the customer is always wrong. And we could ban people. We'd put up pictures of we'd take photographs of people and say, you're banned. Here are the 10 worst customers. And, but
proper rock snobbery.
I know. But
and we love it.
Now that America is all like that, it's sort of like,
it's lost its charm. It's lost its appeal. Okay.
Yeah. Popularity ruins everything, as usual.
But you have been very charming on this podcast for us today, Byron. It's been a great pleasure listening to you and talking with you. That brings us to the end of episode 208 of the Rock's Back Pages podcast. Our thanks to Byron Coley for joining us today and being such a brilliant guest. If you've enjoyed the Rock's Back Pages podcast, please follow it on whichever platforms you use. Give us a review if you can. Please also consider subscribing to Rock's Back Pages itself, or check to see if your local library or academic institution subscribes. If not, please suggest they take a free trial of the world's largest archive of music journalism. We'll be back in a fortnight with the veteran blues and soul scribe David Nathan. But for now, it's farewell and adieu, as Robert Thingamy says in Jaws. Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. From Mark, Jasper and me, and from our guest, Byron Coley. So, Byron, now all together in very imperfect harmony, we are going to sing Goodbye.
Oh, I like the bass note. Very
That concludes episode 208 of the Rock's Back Pages podcast. Many thanks to special guest Byron Coley. Find his book, C'est la guerre, in all good bookshops and follow him on Blue Sky at byroncoley.bsky.social. Those to Barney Hoskins and Mark Pringle, and it was co-hosted and produced by Jasper Murison Bowie. The Rock's Back Pages podcast is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. You can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews at rocksbackpages.com.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.